Hey everyone, it's Andrea of Gaslit Nation with just a quick summary of what is happening in Russia. We're going to do a deeper dive on this on Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern in a special live taping of Gaslit Nation featuring Russian mafia expert Olga Lotman. And you can get access to that at Patreon by signing up, supporting the show at the Truth Teller level or higher at patreon.com/gaslit. And you can drop your questions to us on Tuesday in the chat. There's a lot to go through. Again, you can sign up for the live taping this Tuesday with Russian mafia expert Olga Lotman at patreon.com/gaslit. The timing of this conversation with Olga Lotman is absolutely perfect. Olga has built a NGO out of Denmark, one of the least corrupt countries in the world, where she is working with that NGO to hunt down Putinites, officials, dark money channels who are trying to flood the zone with shit, the shit being corrupt, dark money, Russian oligarch-linked money. So Olga has her finger on the pulse of Putin's foreign influence operations abroad that have been rebuilding since they were first disrupted in the early weeks when he launched his total war, and the Global Democratic Alliance did a big united response in trying to shut these, kick out spies, kick out AKA diplomats from Russian embassies across Europe and so on. So Olga has told me that they've regrouped. And so she's going to update us on what the Russian operations are abroad and also give her insights into Prigozhin's military coup attempt, where she thinks things are headed. And again, you can drop questions in the chat for this Tuesday's live taping at Gaslit Nation. Sign up for that on patreon.com/gaslit. And you will get a link to join that event virtually the morning of the live taping, which will be Tuesday, June 27th, 12 p.m. Eastern. Very much looking forward to that because Olga Lotman has been predicting for a while now that Putin's days are numbered. And I believe so as well, because what we're witnessing coming out of Russia, as I've been calling on the show for a while now, is a Russian elite civil war. Putin is weak. He launched a total war that he absolutely cannot win, backing himself into a corner. And so the sharks are circling. You have sharks within the Russian establishment itself. Then you have sharks on the outside, like Prigozhin, who leads Wagner, the private Russian military operation, which is extremely useful to the establishment. Why? This is what you have to keep in mind. Wagner is leading Russia's operations of looting several African nations right now, committing atrocious war crimes, including its Russian mercenaries raping women in a maternity hospital that just gave birth. They're taking over gold mines and timber forests in Kar. They're empowering their proxies in Sudan to take over gold mines there. All of this is to line their own pockets and also to compensate for the big hit of sanctions. This is how Russia is feeding its war machine, by looting Africa and by looting the parts of Ukraine that they've seized. Prigozhin oversees these war crime operations, these looting operations, overseeing just a private army of absolute sociopaths. Those are very big shoes to fill. And I point that out to start this conversation by saying that Prigozhin did what he did because he knows that the Russian establishment, the Kremlin, needs him. And so just to give some quick background of what has happened, as we've been chronicling on the show, there's been a lot of smack talking by the Russian elites against each other. There's been leaked conversations of them criticizing Putin. And Prigozhin, his big role has been turning himself into a social media darling, appealing to the Russian people directly by posting these videos on social media that then go viral, where he's blasting the Russian Ministry of Defense, saying, they're not giving me enough ammo. Look at this pile of dead Russian Wagner fighters. This is what the Russian establishment has done. I'm your hero. I'm here on the front lines fighting for you. Give me the ammo that I need. And he's even insulted Putin, calling him grandpa, which basically implies Putin's old news. He needs to be put out to pasture. Prigozhin is this new emerging force of Russia. So these insults have gotten more and more spiteful and going for the king. And on top of that, to really emphasize that, in one of his latest videos before launching his military coup attempt against Russia, against the establishment. He spoke directly to the Russian people, saying that the war in Russia is a lie. It's not about Nazis. It's not about Ukraine firing on Donbass. It is a lie. It's all a big lie. And so that's a big sin to commit in the eyes of the Russian establishment. And on top of that, he claimed that the Russian Ministry of Defense was bombing his own soldiers in Ukraine, Wagner fighters in Ukraine. He showed video of that. It was likely staged, a false flag event. And it looks like all this time he was claiming that he was short of ammo, a claim that the U.S. pushed back on based on their intelligence. He may have been stockpiling ammo to do what he did, which was, as we all saw in this dramatic weekend, which was launch a Russian military coup attempt. He does that by taking over first a major Russian southern city, Rostov, which is home to the most effective military command center that Russia has in its ailing war against Ukraine. It's an invasion of Ukraine. So he takes over the A-team. He takes over a city in southern Russia that's home to Russia's military A-team. He blocks off a major road that's a supply route for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So he basically showed the Russian establishment, like, I control your war. I'm going to take over these power centers. I'm going to force you to negotiate with me. And he had about 500 Wagner fighters making it within a few hundred miles of Moscow itself. This throws the country into chaos. You saw Russians in Rostov flooding a train station to get out. You saw soldiers on the street in Moscow. You saw an alert given to citizens of Moscow saying, stay home. You saw a video of a popular shopping mall being shut down. Cement trucks that were put on the road to Moscow were just blown through by Wagner's caravan headed to Moscow. And all of the Russian state propaganda just sounded very much in disarray. And there was reports of the Russian elite getting on planes and getting the hell out of Moscow. But then it all seemed over in a very short amount of time. And the chatter is that Prigozhin cut a deal where there's going to be some changes in the Ministry of Defense and that he's been given amnesty and he's going to be sent to Belarus. And what does that all mean? Well, I will say that one thing is very clear is that normally in these situations, when there's ever been anyone to directly challenge Putin, they've ended up dead or liquidated. And Prigozhin, as we speak at noon on Sunday Eastern time, is still alive. That could change in a matter of days. But if he is allowed to live, if he survives the year, if he survives, that basically confirms that Putin's done with, because Putin's signature, the way Putin has consolidated power and built a cult of personality around himself as a dictator, is by doing away with his enemies in dramatic fashion. There was a renowned investigative journalist, Anna Politkovskaya, who was famously killed on Putin's birthday. There was Boris Nemtsov, who was gunned down in the shadow of the Kremlin on the eve of his big anti-war march, which was supposed to take place across Russia. There was Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who dared to run for president against Putin, who was thrown into prison and had his whole fortune liquidated and divided among Putin's closest cronies and so on. So Putin's signature is doing away with anyone who dares to challenge him in some dramatic fashion. And we have not seen that yet. And that is probably because Putin is weak and the establishment around Putin is jockeying for who's going to ultimately replace him. So what we're seeing now is a Russian elite civil war, and it's been building up for some months now. It escalated to the dramatic events we saw this weekend, a military coup attempt, and it's going to continue to escalate because there are several people who would love to take Putin's spot. There are continued reports that his health is in decline. There's continued reports that he's in his own reality, like he's just in a vacuum of disinformation. And he's just this toxic personality who has driven Russia off the totalitarian cliff. There's no coming back from this without Putin being pushed out of the way. If Prigozhin or some other Russian oligarch around him, like Shoigu, the Russian Minister of Defense, takes his place eventually, like if Putin, quote unquote, dies in his sleep, and a new Russian oligarch takes his place, that would probably be temporary as these guys fight it out through car bombs, through other dramatic assassinations of their proxies. Simply put, Russia, it has created years of pain for itself. It's back to the instability, the infighting of the car bomb 1990s, which saw the oligarchs rise up, a bunch of criminals jockeying for power, and so on. So that's what we're headed towards. It's going to be ugly. It's going to have shocking events. Because Putin is somebody, all dictators think they're going to live forever. So Putin very likely does not have a succession plan. So the oligarchs around him, pretending to be his allies, who are sort of making their calculations, they're the ones who are going to be fighting each other out for this. And Prigozhin made his move because he knows that the Russian establishment is dependent on him. He's like the best thing they have to possibly win this war. He expended about 20,000 Wagner soldiers killed in holding on to Bakhmut alone over a period of 10 months. He did that. He got the bodies for that. Again, he's leading their African operations, the looting of several African countries, which is propping up the war machine and lining their pockets. So they really do need Prigozhin. He's going to be tough shoes to fill if they think they can liquidate him. And the fact that they sent him, supposedly, allegedly, they're claiming sending him to Belarus is actually a good thing for the establishment because Putin has been wanting to absorb Belarus for some time now. Belarus is a vassal state of Russia. It acts that way. And they've made it official on paper that Belarus is going to be absorbed by Russia. And putting such a top dog as Prigozhin in Belarus would basically seal that deal. And also putting him in Belarus, if that's really going to happen, where they've just moved a major arsenal of tactical nukes to. All of those things combined are signaling a major threat to Kyiv. Because remember, when Russia launched its total war, where did it launch from, in part, to try to take over Kyiv, like the nuclear center of a country to occupy it? Belarus. Belarus is a direct shot to Kyiv, just a few hundred miles. And so Prigozhin and an arsenal of nukes in Belarus, big, dangerous, scary threat to Ukraine, as Ukraine is driving currently a counteroffensive to liberate its country from Russian occupation, including recent successes of liberating land in Donbass that has been under occupation by Russia since 2014 when this war first began. So I think that covered enough for now. We will continue to deep dive on this topic and explain to you this wasn't just a simple military coup attempt that fizzled out. This is an ongoing succession battle because Putin is weak. His days are indeed numbered. The fact that this was even allowed to happen in the first place, according to U.S. intelligence, this plan was known to Putin at least 24 hours in advance. And what was so shocking was the lightning speed that Prigozhin was able to take advantage of, because it's very clear the Russian establishment simply does not have its shit together right now. When you're losing a stupid war that you should have never have launched in the first place, and it's time for the infighting and people blaming each other, and the czar, who drove everyone in this direction, is completely isolated, including in their own reality, and increasingly toxic, including calling commanders personally on the front lines, ordering them not to surrender, thinking that he's cosplaying Hitler. Hitler, too, took control over his military in the final days of losing that war. That's basically what we're seeing play out. We're seeing play out the final days of Putin, and we're seeing play out what is going to continue to be a bloody Russian elite civil war. All right, so we will sign off for now, and we'll be back with a live taping of Gaslit Nation to further deep dive on this on Tuesday, June 27th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And so that's what we have for now. If I forgot to mention anything or cover anything, we will cover it on Tuesday. I just wanted to get you something for today, just to ground you in the reality that this is far from over. Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher with the help of Judge Lackey, the narrator of the new Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship. It's easier than you think. Withrow C. Newell,
Chickwin,
Lily Wachowski,
Sean Rubin,
Todd S. Pearlstein,
Kenny Main,
John Schoenthaler,
Ellen McGirt,
Joel Ferran,
Larry Gasson,
Karen A. Deal,
Nico Phillips,
Brian E. Castor,
Tatiana Birsch,
Karen Heisler,
Ann Bertino,
Chris Bravo,
John Millett,
David East,
Aida,
Joseph Mara Jr.,
Julie Matthews,
Meganopolis,
Mark,
Barbara Kittredge,
Matthew Womack,
Sean Berg,
Kristen Kuster,
Kai Gillis,
Sharon Hattrick,
William Barry Reeves,
Richard Smith,
Emmy,
Kevin Gannon,
Mike Christensen,
Sandra Kalnins,
Katie Masuris,
Emily Fenning,
James D. Leonard.
Leo Chalupa.
That's my dad, leave him alone.
Oh, wow.
Carol Golstad,
Jason Benke,
Marcus J. Trent,
Joe Darcy,
Ann Marshall,
Jeremy Lewis,
Trigve,
D.L. Singfield,
Matt Perez,
Nicole Spear,
Abby Road,
Margaret Romero.
Jans Alstrup Rasmussen,
I don't know how to pronounce this.
ZW,
Okay. ZW,
Kathy Kavanaugh,
Sarah Gray,
Jennifer Ann Luter,
John Ripley,
Ethan Mann,
Leah Campbell.
Jared Lombardo,
You are all to report to the Ron DeSantis Re-Education Center, formerly known as Disney's Animal Kingdom, immediately.